Shortly after that, MasterCard came knocking. Very humbling to meet a world leader of that stature. Evelyn and I are great believers in team effort. Ultimately, we're a performance-driven business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Kind Regards podcast. This is your host, Zambian, and I am super excited to introduce today's guest, Muchu Kaingu, the co-founder and chief technology officer of Lupiya. Lupiya is an award-winning fintech based in Zambia, which recently raised over $8 million in venture capital. In this two-part series, we discuss the journey from a $500 initial investment from Muchu and his wife, Evelyn, who is the co-founder and CEO of Lupiya, to the recent venture capital injection of $8.25 million. Lupiya is the first Zambian fintech that operates fully online and enables clients to both borrow money and lend it through its platform. The two co-founders are pioneers in the entrepreneurial space, in that Lupiya was the first Zambian company to be backed by Google through the Google Black Founders Fund, and it even caught the attention of US Vice President Kamala Harris. In this first segment, we discuss the origin story of how Lupiya came to be, how the co-founders bootstrapped their business till it was venture capital ready, and what it was like to meet Kamala Harris. Isn't that exciting? In the second episode, we dig into the nuts and bolts of raising venture capital, what venture capital firms look for, and how that impacts the business. We also touch on how the two co-founders handle growing a demanding startup while being married. Without further ado, let's get into it. Muchu, thank you so much for coming on to chat with us. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you.
Thanks for having me on, Zamir. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for making the time. So before we get started, we, as in the listeners and I, would like to get to know you a bit better. So when I was doing some digging on the interwebs, I found out that Evelyn is a gamer. And I don't know if it's fair to assume that you're a gamer too. Are you a gamer?
Well, perhaps you could refer me as one, but increasingly it's difficult to have time for gaming. But yes, I was a gamer when I had more time on my hands.
So what's your favorite video game and why?
It would be Tomb Raider. I love solving puzzles.
Okay, makes sense. What is your most used emoji?
I would say the thumbs up emoji.
Really?
Very boring, I know. But it summarizes a lot, I think.
It sounds like a boss emoji. You know how sometimes you send someone a long email and they're just like, cool, thumbs up, let's do it.
Yeah, I suppose it's that element of summary that's appealing to me.
And when are you most energetic?
So it would be at night. I'm a night owl.
Lovely. I'm not sure when I'm energetic anymore. It depends on the day. All right. I think we're fairly warmed up. We can get into the discussion. So could you give us an understanding of what your background is and how Lupiya came to be?
My background is in software engineering. Before Lupiya, I was an IT executive for a retail chain in Zambia called Spa. And then at the time when I was making the transition into entrepreneurship, I had an idea of how analytics could be done better for retail companies. So I ended up developing an app for that and then ended up selling it to my previous employers. So at least that catapulted my entrepreneurship journey. And then shortly after that, Evelyn and I started a trading company. And then we tried to access a bank loan, but unfortunately could not get one because we did not have collateral. We went to the informal market and the cost of borrowing was very, very, very high. It was 30% per month. And that was all our profits. So we ended up shutting down that business because we didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And that was the birth of Lupiya. That encouraged us to solve the problem for a lot of young people, young business owners who we saw having a similar challenge. And this was not just a Zambian problem, but an African problem.
That's so true, because I think all of us, especially in the Zambian market, will be aware of the term kaloba, which is prohibitively expensive. Sometimes it can even ruin people's lives, but they feel backed into a corner and have no choice because they've got no access to finance, like you rightly put it, which is the reason why we have the entire informal borrowing sector. So you took the seemingly common practice of peer-to-peer lending and turned it into a venture capital funded multi-million-dollar business, which is really impressive. What do you think differentiates Lupiya from other players in the market? Especially now at a time where it seems everyone is interested in getting into the fintech space. The banks are in it, the telecoms are in it. So what do you think gives Lupiya that differentiating factor?
Thanks for that question, Zamir. For us, it's one thing. It's a purely online service, whereas all the other players would be physical first and then try to do a digital channel on top of that. I should tell you that we pivoted to this model at the peak of COVID. And after that, we've been bullish about proliferating this model and staying true to what we do. So with an online model, obviously comes all the advantages that we've seen after COVID of the efficiency and also transparency. And soon enough, our customers will also reap the rewards of that efficiency by us lowering our lending rates. Yeah, so those are some of the things that separate us from the competition.
I see. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, yours is the only model I've seen where people basically log onto your platform and can deposit an amount and choose who to lend it to, while on the other end, you have the people who are borrowing, right? That's my understanding of your model, as opposed to like a traditional microfinance company where you would maybe just go and put in your funds as a deposit and then get interest back.
Yes, so that is correct. When we're thinking this out, we were very intentional about wanting to create a transparent model where your money as an investor or your money as a lender doesn't go into a black box and basically you don't know how your returns are even calculated. On our model from the onset, you know that if you invest X amount, this would be your return. And our investors have really loved this model because it's unprecedented. That level of transparency on a platform is unprecedented for our market. And we also then offer the same transparency to our borrowers, where right off the bat, they're able to come onto our platform and then put in a required loan amount, and then we tell them what the repayments would look like. This is all without any interaction with a human agent. So it's very efficient and very transparent.
I like that different and disruptive kind of thinking. It's quite impressive. And as I mentioned earlier, you run this company with your wife, Evelyn. How did you decide who would play the respective roles?
So it's more a natural selection, if I put it that way, based on our affinities. So having a software engineering background, I'm very technical. So I like to refer myself as a hacker who builds the technology. And Evelyn's natural affinity is to sell stuff. And I think of her as a hustler who can sell anything. So basically, that combination, I think, is one that I would say is also evident in the strides that we've made in bringing Lupiya to this point.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys played on your different strengths, with her being the CEO and you being the CTO.
Yes, that is correct. Chief Technology Officer. That's correct.
Okay, Lupiya's mission is to foster financial inclusion in Zambia by simplifying the borrowing process and requirements. And I think we've kind of touched on this, but how do you bring this to life in the practical sense of this mission?
It's really a combination of things. One, it's being able to acquire capital. We have various channels, and one is what you've actually mentioned, the peer-to-peer angle. But perhaps the audience should also know that we also do balance sheet lending. So we go to institutional investors who then provide us debt that we then on lend to our customers. And then it's also looking at the parameters that we use to determine who gets access to our services and sort of wanting to deviate from the traditional parameters and looking at customers differently. If a customer doesn't have collateral, for example, is there any other way that we can have confidence in the transaction? So we do all of these sort of things and model it differently so that our credit scoring algorithm is different from a traditional bank.
Just out of interest, so how do you manage the credit risk, seeing as there's no collateral?
So there are other avenues when we don't have collateral. One is off-taker agreements. We've seen off-taker agreements to be quite effective. And for salaried employees, we leverage their salaries to be able to collect. And this is not only from a consumption perspective. One use case that we've seen is very popular is salaried employees funding a side hustle, so a small business, using the funds that we deploy to them.
I see. Okay. I'm keen for you to share some insights into your fundraising journey, such as how you attracted investors and the key milestones that led to you getting over $8 million. dollars. And actually, before we get into that, Muchu, if we could just backtrack a bit, when we spoke prior to this interview, you had mentioned you guys starting out in Wombe and then going online, and you mentioned that pivot. I feel like I'd like to gain some more context as to how that journey happened, right? From Wombe to online to getting millions of dollars in funding.
Yeah, it's a story that I'm proud of telling because one, it just shows how much work has gone into getting the business from where we started to where we are right now. So we started in Ngombe with 6,100 kwacha. At the time, that was about $500. And we lent this to 18 women that were part of a community group in Ngombe, so marketeers, and then they used these funds for working capital. And one of the things that was very encouraging at that time is just looking at this relatively small amount of money and the impact that it had on this community of women. It was just heartwarming for us. And that gave us the urge to want to do this at scale. But then at the time, we did not have all the resources. So we kept funding the business from pocket. We bootstrapped it. And then at a point where we were sure about the business ourselves, we then went out to friends and family, and then used that mechanism to fund the business up to the next phase in 2020, when we saw that we had significant traction to then approach VC firms for a seed round. And we found alignment with a fund called Enigma Ventures based in South Africa. As we made progress to closing that deal, COVID broke out and the cases just kept increasing. And we reached a point where on both ends, while the investor initiated the conversation, we had a hard conversation with them to say, maybe this is not the best time to invest because we don't know what will happen to the world, especially to Africa, post-pandemic or during the pandemic. Yeah, so they told us that they were going to press the pause button. At the time, we were running a hybrid model that was more physical than digital, and it was an existential crisis for Lupiya. So we came back to the drawing table and then thought that, well, we have nothing to lose. Why don't we try a completely online model? I spent a weekend, given my background, coding the first version of Lupiya. And it was very simple. The idea was just to be able to get the loan applications online and then figuring out the disbursement channels, which was the straightforward part. And in making that decision, we saw significant improvement in terms of pipeline. That year, we ended up quadrupling our revenue. Investor was happy. That's the evidence that they needed to know that Lupiya would thrive post the pandemic. And we've never looked back ever since. So that investor then gave us a seed round of $1 million. And that, in collaboration with our pivot to a completely online model, then really catalyzed our growth. And we've been growing very aggressively ever since. And after that, then we were part of the inaugural Google Black Founders Fund, first company in Zambia to be backed by Google. And then also part of the first 30 companies in Africa to be backed by Google as well. Shortly after that, MasterCard came knocking and they said they loved what we were doing and they wanted to add payment rails onto our platform. So we got into a partnership with MasterCard last year. So we've been growing from strength to strength. And then this year, when Vice President Kamala Harris visited the country all the way from America. She heard of the impact that we were having on our country and she wanted to be part of that. So we took her to visit one of our customers in the agri space. And then leading up to this point where we've raised the $8.25 million as part of a Series A round.
Super impressive that you got the attention of Kamala Harris. She's very inspirational. What was that like?
Yeah, it was great and also tense leading up to the visit. We were not allowed to discuss it with anyone, not the team, not our families. So it was very hush hush, obviously because of the security concerns. So all the people in our network were only knowing about us meeting her when she arrived, which was crazy because then the team was like, oh, why were we not thought about this? We would have wanted to be part of this as well. Yeah, it was quite tense. The drills were tense as well. We had a whole Secret Service detail telling us what to do and what not to do. It was crazy, but then also quite exciting, very humbling to meet a world leader of that stature. And also managing to get our son to meet her. He has political aspirations, so we wanted to inspire him. So just that handshake, I think, would go a long way in inspiring how far he can go in his own career. It was great. She's a great person, great communicator. Talking to her, you feel like, oh, yes, I can conquer the world. Like she just has that effect on you.
Wow. I saw the video of that visit and you guys speaking to her and, her giving you that shout out when she was giving that speech. And I just thought, wow, this is really, really impressive. And if that's not an indicator as to what kind of impact you're having, then, I don't know what is. And as for your son meeting her, I think, how when you go to events, to corporate events or team building stuff, and they're like, share one fun fact about yourself. I think your son is set for life. He can always get to say, I've met Kamala Harris. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Just a follow on question on what you said. So when you were operating in Ngombe and, pivoting onto online, were you doing this full time already or was it something you were doing on the side? Because I imagine that must have been quite frightening with COVID to not really be sure about what's going to happen to your business.
Yes. So we're fortunate to have multiple businesses at the time. So we actually have a software consulting business. And we also experimented with a traditional restaurant. We call them Mateveto restaurants. So we had varied income streams. I suppose that helped in just having that resilience for any shocks in the business model.
So you spoke about how when you knew it was going to work, you then started to get funding from basically family and friends or your network. What was that moment when you were like, aha, this is going to work out? We should go all in.
That's a great question you've asked me because, for context, why we waited up to that point, your friends and family are your support system. So you don't want to take to them something that can lose them money, right? Because then once you do that, then your reputation is gone. So, yeah, we waited up to that point. We tried it with our own money first so that we had that evidence to say, like, yeah, this is going to work. We've tried it with our own money. We've gotten from this point to this point. And in terms of that moment, it was just the moment when we realized that the business model was functional. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. We're growing every single month. So the only thing that we saw is that we were limited by capital. We couldn't continue funding this at scale. So it was a measure of two things. One, did we believe that once community gave us the money that we would be able to multiply it and pay them back? And then two is, did we have the resources internally to continue financing the business? So it was a measure of those two things.
As you've grown and as you continue to grow, so you had your first round of funding, which was $1 million, and now you have the $8.25 million. What strategies and decisions did you or are you implementing to scale your operations as you grow your customer base even further and the demand for your services also grows?
So Evelyn and I are great believers in team effort. We believe that to do this at scale, we need to have a great team. So a lot of our effort is bringing the right people on the bus to then execute on our overall vision. The second pillar is on the technology front. So we're investing heavily on technology to ensure that our business can function properly at scale. And then the third piece is also starting an expansion program into neighboring countries. So in a month's time, we'll be launching Lupiya in Tanzania. And then shortly after that, we'll be launching in Malawi as well.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How are you ensuring that you hire right? Because people can make or break your business. How are you ensuring that you build the right team that supports the objectives as you grow?
There's a lot of factors that go into play here. One, we look at what people have been able to achieve in the past, their track record. We have a data point where we also, through AI, we analyze our candidates before we onboard them. And then the third piece is cultural fit. So we look at those three pieces, put them together, and then that's how we determine who is a good fit for Lupiya. It's not so much that they're not a good candidate, it's just that based on those three parameters, they might not be the best fit for Lupiya. And as you can guess, the first hire we made was a head of people and culture who is tried and tested. So she's helping bring the right people on the bus already.
Not to digress, I just want to confirm, is the name Lupiya inspired by the Bemba word for money, which is Rupiya?
It is, yes. That was the inspiration.
I love when businesses use local names for that. But yeah, how else are you guys leveraging AI in your business, and how would you describe the work culture that you're aiming for within the organization?
We use AI for our credit decisioning, for our recruitment processes, and also lately we've been using a lot of generative AI to just be that complement for the team. So the generative AI is a wildcard that just helps our team become more productive.
What is generative?
Generative AI is AI that is creative. So rather than just making decisions from data, generative AI goes a step further into being creative. So it can create art, it can create essays like you've seen, it can write you an email, a letter. It's almost like having a digital executive assistant.
So the closest thing that comes to mind is like Chat GPT.
Yes.
Sorry, you're going to go on to describe the culture within Lupia?
Yes. So the culture within Lupiya is so we're a young team, and that's also part of our brand. Our brand is a fresh brand. So young team, very collaborative. The environment is very open in terms of communication, not too much hierarchy. Yeah, so we like people to freely share their ideas, to come as their true selves. And then ultimately, we're a performance driven business. So a lot of our culture also stems from that.
It sounds like an enabling environment for success. And what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that you've encountered while operating a fintech company in Zambia?
So one of them is perhaps not so apparent. In the early stages of our model, we got a lot of questions around whether we are real just because of our model being completely online, because people are skeptical about being scammed online. They wanted to know that Alupia was actually a real company with real people. So we're very intentional about creating brand awareness, and that's why we've heavily invested in PR, both in the way we appear in the media, but also doing a bit of physical campaigns, so billboards, just to make people feel comfortable that this is actually a real company. The other one has been bringing the right people on the bus at a shoestring budget. So that lean budget is very difficult to then also hire the best talent in the market. But to build great technology, you need a great team. So it's a bit of a catch 22 there.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that we've gotten to this point. That was the core thesis of the fundraise, that we wanted to bring capital in order to ensure that we had all the right pieces in place to scale the business to the next level.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And if you found it useful, please remember to share it with someone in your life who you think would benefit from it. Tune in next week for part 2, where we discuss the details of raising venture capital and how that impacts the business. I hope you have an amazing week ahead. Kind regards, Zamiwe.